Clark County, I'm Rob Anderson with Reform Clark County, and today we'll look into one of the great mysteries that is developing here in Clark County, what happened to the Skamania Report. Also, Councilor Marshall, who made a very big announcement, along with Fuentes and Councilor Young, brought forth a unity resolution that promotes something entirely different and more charter review progress. But before we jump in, hit the like, the share, notification, subscribe, wake the neighbors, tell your friends, and consider supporting the show and the effort here at Reform Clark County, which just gives you a closer look of what's happening in Clark County. So the big news is, where's the Skamania Report? So remember the Skamania Report? I have some big news on the mystery of what's happened to the Skamania Report that was supposed to be forwarded to another prosecuting agency for review. Remember that? This is the Skamania Report, where a detective found evidence that several county officials didn't follow the law. They broke the law regarding the Belcott removal from the C-Tran board, and then it apparently went missing. Nowhere to be found. A political version of Where's Waldo. For months, I couldn't get a straight answer about its status or even where the report physically was and who has it. According to the PRR results, that's public records requests for those wondering, no agency had a copy of it in Clark County. So let's talk a little background here. In March 2025, I filed a criminal complaint with the sheriff's office to investigate potential crimes committed by county councilors when they removed Councilor Belcott, all in an apparent attempt to change the outcome of a pending vote that would have been like a poison pill for light rail, would have killed it. Councilor Belcott would have been the deciding vote to block this O&M, that's operations and maintenance funding. But Chair Sue Marshall jumped into action. She tabled the vote on March 11th, and then the very next day had Belcott removed, all by magic and happenstance, of course. So they moved to get her off of the C-Tran board, with Will Fuentes replacing her, who is a fellow Vancouver resident. And it's worth noting that Mayor Ann was one of Fuentes' top individual donors, giving $1,000 to his council campaign. So the criminal complaint was rightfully forwarded to Skamania County for the investigation because obvious conflict of interest. The detective dug into it for months, even though the 4 county councilors and the county manager did not comply with the detective's interview request. So then on November 6th, the Skamania Report was released, hit my inbox. On November 7th, the prosecuting attorney, Tony Gulick, stated in the Clark County Today article, quote, "Our office has received the report from Skamania County. Our office has determined we have a conflict, and we will ask an outside prosecuting office to review the Skamania County report," end quote. And that's when the great mystery begins of the Where's Waldo of the Skamania Report. So what agency has it? Where is the report now? Who has it? And so for months, November, December, January, silence. I sent emails asking for updates. No response. I began sending inquiries of multiple agencies, so not just one, several. Who has the report? And it felt like a game of hot potato or trying to find Bigfoot. I contacted the prosecutor's office, and Gulick's own statement made it really clear that they had received it, they reviewed it, and they determined something about it. So, but based on the results I'm getting, they don't have it. No one has a copy of it. So I'm not quite sure how you can make those, determinations without actually having it, but that was the case that was going on here. So I put in public records requests, but my request came back nothing. I got back that, quote, they inquired with all the potential involved PA staff, that's prosecuting attorney staff, including Tony Golick, the prosecuting attorney, and they have no responsive records in their possession, end quote. How is that possible? How can you be responsible for shepherding a report to another agency if you don't actually possess it? So I sent in, these public records requests to the sheriff's office. Maybe they had it. Nope, they never had it. I then sent a formal demand letter. It took a demand letter to the prosecuting attorney's office asking for a status, and no response for over a month. Nothing. Finally, here's the big news. Here's the big news. Tony Golick finally replied, and he says this, quote, the Clark County Prosecutor's Office made a request to the Attorney General's office to review the alleged crime in that report. The Attorney General's office declined to accept the case for review. After the Attorney General's office declined to review the case, the Clark County Prosecutor's Office made a request to the Vancouver City Prosecutor to review the criminal allegation. The Vancouver City Prosecutor has declined to accept the case for review. When the Clark County Prosecutor's Office has an agreement from an outside agent to review the case, you will be advised. So this report, that's end quote. So this report, which allegedly, documents numerous potential violations by several county officials, is effectively nowhere to be found. And I'm told, hey, just, we'll let you know when we want to tell you something. So is it a surprise that instead of just, taking it to Cowlitz County or even back to Skamania County, where it came from, they decided to take it to the state AG and the city of Vancouver, two very politically aligned agencies that declined to even review it. They wouldn't even read it, let alone review it. So let me tell you how this likely went. This is my recreation of this. So they picked up the phone, they called him, said, hey, I got this report that I really want it to go away, and you don't even have to read it. So what do you think? Oh, perfect. You're not gonna, you're gonna reject it. Okay, that's perfect. That's what I want. Thanks. That's probably pretty close to how that went. There was a phone call that was made, conversation, someone maybe described what they thought about it, and the other person on the line said, nah, we'll just let that disappear. So a detective potentially found, these criminal violations despite, 4 counselors and the county manager stonewalling interviews. In my whole life of being in Clark County, I have never heard of a bigger story as in this, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 county officials that have criminal, violations alleged on them, and the report is just disappeared. It's gone. Poof. It's gone. So I can't think of anything that comes close to this, but this is the situation that we're in, and it's just gone. And the report is just functionally, it's just disappeared. Poof. Gonzo. There it was, and now it's gone. So there's direct evidence here suggesting, a conspiracy to violate OPMA, the county charter, the state law. But the report documenting this is now down a rabbit hole. So you would think even with the conflict of interest, which Tony Golick stated, there's clearly a conflict of interest, you would think that there would be a heightened demand for transparency, for urgency, for openness. Instead, we're seeing the opposite. That's why in the coming weeks, I'll be laying out evidence directly to you that I believe shows the crimes that took place. What I found through my own investigation, demands of discovery and affidavits and declarations that I've collected over the months. So Chair Marshall announced Tuesday that she will not seek re-election. It was kind of big news. It wasn't sure, going back and forth, the rumors that I was hearing, will she run? She's going to run. She's not going to run. And as you know, I, along with many others, have brought significant attention to her record, repeated tax increases, constant fee hikes, regulatory expansion, attempts to eliminate prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, those kind of actions have been in the forefront, not to mention the C-Tran board, the whole fiasco there, where in order to try to preserve the light rail. It was ultimately Marshall's maneuvering that kept light rail alive. And if it ever gets built, I don't know, maybe they should consider naming a train after her because she was so instrumental in keeping it alive. I'm not sure if it was all these things, if it was her decision not to run due to personal reasons or these kind of things or the pressures or, the mounting scrutiny that, her record, she was going to have to account for her record or, just being 75 years old. Maybe it was just time to hang up. I'm not sure. We might never know, really, but what we do know is that she's not done because this week she brought another resolution to the county council. So this week, a Trojan horse was wheeled before the county council named Unity Resolution. That's basically what happened because it's not at all about unity. This resolution that they put forward is really, and it was put forward by Councilor Marshall and Fuentes in particular. On paper, it condemns, political violence, which this would be the third in just a few months, and calls for civility. Something that Matt Little pointed out was like, hey, we've had several resolutions on this. So, a unity resolution, that sounds harmless, but when you look closer, it's something entirely different. It, in fact, instead incorporates equity and inclusion language in the same DEI framework that, quite frankly, the voters rejected not once, but twice in prior charter amendments. When voters say no, and the same philosophy then is repackaged and put before in a resolution instead, that doesn't sound like democracy to me. So thanks to questions from Councilor Belcott, we learned who helped really shape this so-called unity resolution, who was crafting it behind the scenes.
Who were the community members that were involved with this?
Let's see, I think it was Southwest Washington Equity Coalition, NAACP.
Okay, thank you.
So this got me digging into the Southwest Washington Equity Coalition's website. Who are these people? What are they all about? What I found out was very interesting information, and it has very little to do with unity or civility, in my opinion. Their stated mission, if you go on their website, includes dismantle structural white supremacy. And they talk about morphing or dismantling oppressive systems. They promote mutual liberation that's not community bridge building language. That's neo-marxist language. They frame society as a hierarchy of oppression that must be reconstructed. Phrases like targeted universalism, solidarity dividend, and liberatory practices come straight out of modern critical theory, a neo-Marxist worldview that divides society into oppressor and oppressed groups and then seeks to redistribute power through transformative change. But when you listen to Councilor Young describe, why he supports this, he obviously doesn't understand the divisive nature of the neo-Marxism here and their true goal. And he's either quite aware and supportive or just not paying attention.
And I really feel that we've all got to work past our differences and realize we're all humans, we're all people, and we all have different views and perspectives, and that is okay. And what's not okay is to think that your perspective only is the only proper perspective, and that specifically that violence would ensue because of this. It's just pure insanity, in my opinion. So,
which, by the way, this all is being funded by your tax dollar, my tax dollars. I could only find 2021 financials, and besides their pass-through for services finances, almost all their money comes from government sources, including City of Vancouver, Clark County Public Health, Clark County Community Services. So let's be honest about all of this. Unity means, allowing disagreement. That's not what this is. What this framework advances is alignment and conformity to a specific ideological direction for institutions. Because if your mission is to dismantle and rebuild systems, then resistance isn't just disagreement. It becomes obstruction. And we all see what happens when you don't go along with their demands. So that's a very different model than pluralism. But Rob, wait a minute. This is just a resolution. Settle down. It doesn't really matter that much. Au contraire, mon frere. This is why it matters. Resolutions aren't just, symbolic. They establish policy direction. They lay the groundwork. They justify future action. And the Charlie Kirk resolution eats at them. They have to, retake this ground. They think it's theirs. And this is no doubt a counter to the Charlie Kirk resolution. But this time they're trying to take their DEI religion and put it back on top. Also, mark my words, they are setting the table for what happens next with the Fort Vancouver Regional Library and their trustees, who resisted their magic words and their sacred doctrine of DEI. This resolution is laying the groundwork for what might be coming next in the equity struggle sessions that will probably follow. Nonetheless, the resolution, the unity, or I'd like to call the conformity resolution, passed 3-2, Marshall, Fuentes, and Young, moving it forward. And once again, Councilor Glenn Young, was the deciding vote for this conformity resolution. But before we go, I think it's really important to talk about why you should care about all of this. If you're a Christian, you should really care about this, because God is not silent on these matters. And even though, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, it is against ideologies, or what 2 Corinthians 10 calls pretensions that set themselves up against the knowledge of God. Take every thought captive, Scripture tells us. But even if you're not a Christian, the neo-marxist ideology is antithetical to the constitutional republic. It aims to destroy it, dismantle it. This isn't debate about how better to, spend tax money, or we need this program or that program. No. They want to bring down what they call the empire. So there's no middle ground here, or area for sitting on the sideline. I wish we could. I wish we could just kind of take a break and sit back and look back and wait for it all to work out. But we do so at our own peril. So, if you're a patriot, if you're a God-fearing country, person, whatever you see, you need to be involved in this, because this is the challenge of our time. And as Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, if you can keep it. So, meanwhile, on the Charter Review Commission, it's gaining momentum, basically. 16 amendment proposals have been introduced so far. Some include, a supermajority requirement for tax increases. Thank goodness we need that. Budget transparency measures, land use review changes, ethics committee reforms, which we need big reforms there too, initiative and referendum adjustments, prioritizing public safety. So previously, there was a a commissioner who discussed how he wanted all elected, like the sheriff, the assessor, the auditor. He wanted all those roles appointed. Well, that paperwork hasn't come forward. It hasn't materialized yet, but we'll keep an eye on that. Charter amendments require 2 readings before moving to a committee. So if you care about, long-term structure of Clark County governance, tune in Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. And the charter review, quite frankly, might be the most consequential issue that's really developing right now. So you don't want to miss it. So that's Reformcast this week. It takes a significant amount of effort to produce these episodes and put them out. So please like, share, subscribe, and consider supporting the show at the Give, Send, Go under Reform Clark County. And if you have tips, if you have questions or topics that you'd like investigated, email me at rob@reformclarkcounty.com. And remember, with God's help, you are the catalyst of reform. See you next time.